Welcome to this session on cleaning and low-level disinfection in school settings. My name is Kate Tyner. I'm an infection preventionist and a nurse at Nebraska ICAP in Omaha, Nebraska. The key points that we'll be discussing today are cleaning and disinfection, the terminology and basics, selecting products, and development of the program. And as a disclaimer, I've made every attempt to provide an unbiased and balanced presentation, but the topic lends itself to talking about specific chemical names. So I've changed name brands wherever possible to reflect generic names, but if I slip and name a product, it was not intentional. I don't sell anything and I don't need to promote any specific product. So why is it important to talk about cleaning and disinfection in school settings? I would ask you, what other service protects every child, staff member, and guest in the environment, keeps illness from spreading, and it also presents incredibly positive optics? And so in order to talk about this in a scientific way, it's very important to minimize any misunderstanding that cleaning, sanitizing, and disinfection are truly different tasks. People often bandy about these terms as if they are the same or synonyms, and they simply are not. They mean very different things in your housekeeping or custodial environment. So you can find out more about this on the EPA website. This is a very important topic anytime you're using chemicals for cleaning and disinfection. And so if you want more information, please do use that resource. But the basics here are that cleaning removes germs in the way that it cleans dirt and organic materials from surfaces using soap and detergents or surfactants. An example of when to do it is every single time you intend to clean, disinfect, or sanitize a surface. Cleaning is the necessary first step. The example I like to use is, think about when you have dirty dishes at home. Think about a dish that's very sticky with macaroni and cheese. We're not going to be able to get the germs off that surface if that sticky macaroni sauce is still on the plate. And so in order to truly disinfect or sanitize the surface, we first have to remove the cheese so that we can get to the plate surface and actually clean it, and then disinfect that surface from germs. Sanitizing is a chemical step that's very specific to food contact surfaces. Sanitizing kills bacteria, but not usually viruses. Disinfecting kills both viruses and bacteria. This is something that's important on high-touch surfaces and surfaces that are contaminated by blood or body fluid. Cleaning, again, is the very necessary first step of any disinfection process, or any sanitation process for that matter. All the statements on this slide are incredibly important, but I'll highlight the ones that I'll read through because I think they kind of summarize and tell the story. But I do think it's important to kind of take note of all the bullets. The physical action of scrubbing with detergent or surfactant. Surfactants are chemicals that break down oil and grease. And then rinsing with water removes substantial numbers of microorganisms. We can picture that. That's a process we can see, right? Is that we've removed the gunk and we wash it down the drain. Removing any visible blood in inorganic or organic matter can be as critical to any disinfection process as the disinfecting itself, right? We have to clean away anything on the surface in order to get that germicidal activity. So when we talk about disinfection, we can break down a little bit the mechanism of action of these chemicals, truly pesticides that kill bacteria and viruses. So one of the ways that these chemicals kill is through oxidation. They disrupt the cell wall of bacteria. So then the cell breaks down, it loses its structure and dies. Denaturation is when the molecule breaks down the protein cell walls. And again, the cell collapses and loses functions or dies. An example of that would be if we use an alcohol. And then surface active agents impact cell walls and membranes by the surface charge. And the example of the agent that uses that is your quaternary ammonia products. So the requirement to disinfection, again, the only way we can disinfect is if the surface is clean and free of gross soil. In order to disinfect, we have to have the appropriate concentration of active ingredients or the appropriate dilution. We have to ensure that the chemical is applied in the correct way, right? If we don't hit a surface with that chemical, we're not going to kill any germs on the surface. We have to saturate the surfaces in order to let that chemical touch the cells and make them die. And it's very important that we allow sufficient time for the agent to kill microorganisms. We call that contact time. There is no chemical that cleans or disinfects 100% on contact. Certainly, the chemicals begin to work at the point of contact, but they need to sit and dwell in place to really get that full effect of organism kill. So more about contact time. We sometimes call this dwell time, but in my industry, contact time is the word we use. It is the amount of time that a disinfectant needs to sit on the surface without being wiped away or disturbed to effectively kill germs. And the contact time, it varies by the type of chemical you're using, it varies by the brand of chemical that you're using, and it also varies by what you intend to kill. For example, bloodborne pathogens or viruses actually are pretty easy to kill. A lot of times those can be killed in only 1 minute with some disinfectants, but that same disinfectant might need up to 3 or 10 minutes to kill things like tuberculosis or C. difficile, different types of organisms that really have stronger cell walls is really what it comes down to. So it's important, if we're going to use these chemicals properly and get that full disinfection action out of them, we have to know how to use them. So when we talk about cleaning and disinfection, you as school nurses and people working in the school setting, it's very important that we talk accurately about the process. We must clean and then disinfect. If we're using kind of these ubiquitous pop-up wipes, we can buy them off the shelf at any big box store. A lot of times these are what are available in your classroom. They're available on my kitchen counter upstairs right now. If we're using a disposable disinfectant wipe, the user must use one wipe to clean the surface, discard, and then come back with a second wipe to disinfect. Okay, wipe, discard, wipe. That's how you get your cleaning action followed by a disinfection action with the appropriate amount of contact time. If we're using a liquid spray, then we would spray the surface with the product, wipe it to clean the surface, and then follow with another round of spray and let it dwell or sit there to hit that contact time to disinfect the surface. So very important that you, as people with a healthcare background or healthcare knowledge, when we're talking to people about how to use these chemicals, that we talk about it in the appropriate way. We clean and then we disinfect. And so anybody who's kind of new to the world of disinfection and cleaning, as soon as you see your first bucket, open bucket or bucket immersion process, it might strike fear into your heart. But let me tell you, it doesn't necessarily have to do that. There's a very correct way to use bucket immersion. And when used correctly, it really is probably the easiest and most effective way to clean large surface areas. In order to make bucket immersion safe and effective, 3 points have to be followed every time. The wipes are only removed from the bucket. They're never double dipped. When people are using this process, they need to have a dirty rag bag available in their work area so that as soon as they wipe the surface, that wipe goes directly into the dirty rag bag or bucket. It's not reused. And finally, we need to change out rags fairly frequently to ensure that they stay saturated. There's enough liquid on that wipe so that the contact time, if we're using it on a surface and the contact time is 3 minutes, then we need to have that rag wet enough that the liquid that's left behind will stay liquid and stay wet for 3 minutes. So reusable cleaning cloths are a perfectly safe and effective thing to use in the cleaning environment. Again, with a couple caveats. Reusable cleaning cloths should be single use. That is, we use them to wipe a surface. Maybe they've been in the bucket with the disinfectant solution. We use them and then they go right to the rag bag. We don't ever double dip them. We don't use them again until they've been laundered. Microfiber is really the preferred type of cloth in the industry for cleaning and disinfection. It doesn't retain bacteria through laundering because it doesn't have lint. It often creates a nicer, cleaner surface. And so a lot of people are moving towards microfiber. It's not a requirement, but it has some of its own little indications to use in a quality way. Sponges, on the other hand, should really never be used. There's no way to disinfect that sponge after use to make it safe to use again. So we just should not be using sponges in the school setting. Between uses, rags should be laundered in hot water without bleach or fabric softener, especially if they're microfiber. But you should really look at your rag manufacturer's instructions for the specific directions. The rags that you have on hand very well may have different directions. And so ensure that whatever you're using, you have a standard process, a standard rag, and that you're following the directions for laundering to ensure that those rags stay in good form and don't actually keep any organisms on them. Most manufacturers recommend low heat for drying. Part of that is so we can get our rags to last longer. And in general, microfiber particularly should not be dried with any other cloths, rags, or towels because of the lint. So cleaning and disinfectant safety. It's important when we consider chemical disinfectants are the same category of chemical as pesticides. We are purposely using a chemical to kill organisms. That's just the truth. And so we have to be cognizant that since we're killing organisms, we're going to require some additional safety things for our eyes, our skin, and our tissues to keep us safe in the environment where we're using these disinfectants. So consider opening doors and windows or use fans so that we can increase air circulation depending on the type of chemical you're using. Definitely, we have to wear the recommended protective equipment. For example, almost every chemical will require you to wear gloves and eye protection to use it. So this is really important when we think about making sure things are available to our teams, but then thinking about who else in the school setting is using the chemicals. Are we having students in classrooms use chemicals, even pop-up wipes? If that's the case, then we need to be thinking about how we're talking to students about how to take care of their hands so that we don't cause tissue irritation. If the product instructions tell you to dilute the product with water, you have to be cognizant of the temperature of water that you're using for dilution. We also have to be very careful for dilution that we are taking care so that we're not causing splashes that can hurt our employees. And I have some more information about that coming up. All chemicals should be labeled clearly. We have to store and use the chemicals out of the reach of children and animals. We can never mix products and chemicals because it could be hazardous and change chemical properties. We should never eat or drink near chemicals. These products can cause serious harm. So one of the things I like to do when I'm walking around the environment, especially if people are using a custodial or a housekeeping cart, I like to check to see if they have a water bottle or a drink bottle on their cart, and I discourage them from doing that. We should make sure that our housekeepers and our custodians have a safe place to store their drink and adequate time to take the breaks they need to do their job. It's simply not safe to have drinks stored right by chemicals or in areas where we're encountering, blood and body fluid. And immediately after disinfecting, we should wash hands with soap and water for 20 seconds. Even if we're using gloves, we should do the same hand wash procedure when gloves are removed. Food surfaces are not addressed in this presentation. The complexity of food safety is beyond the scope of what I can do here. What I will say is those people in the system who are accountable for cleaning and disinfection processes, you want to make sure you have a line of sight as to what's going on with your food surfaces. We can't ignore them. We want to be partners with the people who are doing those processes. In addition, the USDA Serve Safe Food Handler Program is a wonderful program, and those people who are using or in the food safety areas should really have that good training to be safe. And again, similar to what we talked about before, sponges are not recommended in this area. So when we talk about selection of products, several considerations that have to be made. The speed of disinfection is important. We talked about the dwell time or the contact time before. There are many agents, especially the ammonia-based agents, that take up to 10 minutes of contact time to reach their effective full efficacy. And when you think about 10 minutes is a long time. And so we might not choose those in areas where we're going to have rapid turnover of students, for example. Disinfectants aren't the same as cleaners, but some disinfectants have some cleaning capability. And if you're using a product that you really want to have both abilities, you have to select your disinfectant with that in mind. We have to be cognizant of personnel health and safety, as well as child health and safety in the environments where we're going to use these. Cost is always a consideration. Surface compatibility is very important, such as bleach is a great cheap agent. It kills tons of stuff, but it's really hard on surfaces. It bleaches them, it corrodes them, et cetera. And then the application method is also important. We want to make sure people who are tasked with other things in the environment, such as a teacher, they're not being counted on to dilute chemicals, to pour chemicals, et cetera. We want something in their environment, if they're asked to kind of quickly clean and disinfect, that they have a very convenient method, such as a spray or a pop-up wipe. So here's a breakdown of the different disinfectant agents that are most commonly used. Chlorine, or bleach solutions, also known as sodium hypochlorite, it's EPA registered. It has a low incidence of toxicity. It reduces biofilms, and it's sporicidal, or it kills things like norovirus or C. diff, or things that can be found in feces in specific concentrations. Unfortunately, it also causes discoloration and is corrosive on many surfaces. Quaternary ammonia, or quats, also are EPA registered. They're very surface compatible. They're active against many bacteria, viruses, and fungi, but they're not really effective against those spore agents, again, that we find in feces. Improved hydrogen peroxide is kind of the newest kid on the block. It has really got a great profile. It's EPA registered. It does not stain. It's very surface compatible. It has excellent coverage of organisms, including being sporicidal or effective against those fecal agents. And it's also very benign for the environment. The downside is it's pretty expensive. Phenolics are an older agent. They're also EPA registered. They're very common in healthcare. They're active against many bacteria. But again, they're not effective against the spores or the fecal bacteria. And they can actually be pretty irritating to tissue. And then alcohol, I think, has like pretty positive profile to your general public. People are like, oh yeah, alcohol is great. That's what we see, you know, if I get a shot in the doctor's office, that's what you're using on my skin or on top of the rubber stopper of the medication vial. However, it's not EPA registered. It doesn't kill spores, and it doesn't have detergent or cleaning properties. And since it dries so fast, it actually can inactivate really quickly on shelves. Like if you have pop-up wipes with alcohol, they can dry out very easily. And it can actually fix some agents to surfaces because it dries so quickly. In addition, it's important to think about in the school environment. Children are more vulnerable to exposure to chemicals because they're growing and developing. Their little bodies have a harder time breaking down toxins. They breathe twice as much per body weight as adults. They have softer, more absorbent skin and smaller airways, and they also spend time close to the floor. For these reasons, it's important to choose products that, when possible, are fragrance-free or free of dyes. If we don't need an antibacterial agent, if we don't need to disinfect, then we shouldn't use those harsh chemicals around them. We want to choose preparations that don't have a propellant. They're not an aerosol. And it's nice to see a third-party certification that these are safer chemicals. And finally, when we talk about cost, ready to use, you think about what we would employ in our home or in the public sphere. We think about pre-mixed solutions, your laundry detergent, your spray bottle that you use to clean your surfaces around your house. Those are ready to use. They're pre-diluted. I just open up that bottle and I spray it or use it right away. They're costly on a per use scale, and they require a lot of storage when you consider the vast amount of space that's being cleaned and disinfected in your schools. For this reason, dispensing stations are a very good solution because you're really cleaning and disinfecting at an industrial level. Dispensing stations add some really nice features. They're a lot safer. They reduce the risk of splash, and they also really standardize the dilution. So picture somebody trying to measure out a chemical and mix it with water. There's a lot of room for error there. There's a lot of room for splashing and injury. A dispensing station eliminates a lot of that risk. And so again, when you're cleaning and disinfecting on a very big scale, a lot of surface area, I would like you to consider dispensing stations to kind of promote standardization and safety. And I have no bias to the chemicals. This was just a nice picture of a dispensing station, so you would know what I was talking about. So when we talk about program development, again, I understand most of the people listening to this presentation are school nurses. And so it's important to think about how you would interact with the program and what your impact might be. Ideally, you would be able to be part of the process or part of the policy development to say what surfaces should be cleaned versus disinfected, right? Again, if we don't have to use those disinfecting agents, then we shouldn't. When we're using a disinfectant, how do we set our policy about when that disinfectant should be changed? For example, if I prepare a bucket of diluted disinfectant, that bucket immersion product, do I change that once a day? Do I change it when I run dry? Can I save that till the next day? That's a really important part that you, with a healthcare background, with a nursing background, would be a good person to be part of that decision-making process. In the same way, after a person has been sick, what has to be wiped down or disinfected? Does the disinfectant have to be refreshed? Things like that. You'll be closer to the processes in your schools, and I would like you to have the ability to kind of take a look at those things and have an impact on how we're setting these things up and setting the expectations. It's also a place where we can talk about disposable versus reusable mop heads and cleaning cloths. Where do we need to have a higher quality product versus where somewhere where we can use something that we can choose a lower cost option. It's important to think about the impact of orientation and training. How are we training people who come into the building, and who are we training, right? Clearly, we would want to train our custodial staff, but what about teachers and students who might also interact with those chemicals? Really, anybody who touches the chemical should have some orientation and training on how to be safe while doing it and to use it properly. And then communication strategies. Are we going to have things available on a shared drive where many people can access a training file, for example? Are these paper binders? How will we communicate the expectations so that we can have standard and safe practices? This slide is just an excerpt of a policy from a healthcare organization, mind you, of things that are set by policy, what should be included in that custodial employee's education. It's just an example for your review. And when we talk about developing a training program, again, that could be for the custodial and housekeeping staff, that could be for your teachers and other people in the building. I think a checklist is a nice item. It's not a requirement, but certainly a checklist will help people be clear and standard about what surfaces in a room should be cleaned, what should be disinfected, what chemicals should I use on each. When I train people, could those be laminated sheets, job aids to help? If we're cleaning up a spill, for example, that's a time when you want people to have a very standard practice where they can maybe do a checklist to make sure I got all the things done. And then is there ever an opportunity to evaluate the performance, to make sure that we're doing the things that administration expects us to do? So when we talk about that checklist, think about even identifying in different parts of the building what should be cleaned and disinfected. What surface in the main entrance, hallways and lobbies? How are classrooms and offices different? What about restrooms, gyms and fitness facilities, and kitchens and break rooms? Those are all different types of areas. And the cleaning process in those areas will definitely be different. High-touch surfaces are an important thing to consider. These are, when we think about the importance, again, every student, every staff member, every guest in your building is going to interact with your environment. And it's important to make sure that they're clean and disinfected. Especially during periods of high infection rates, we want to be able to make sure we're touching, somehow like hitting these areas again to make sure we're really decreasing the number of organisms on these surfaces. So some examples here. For example, in bathrooms, toilets, flush handles, toilet roll dispensers, sinks, sink handles, door handles. Think about the number of times people are touching those areas every day. And if we can get in there even a second time or a third time to hit those areas, we're really going to see an increased safety profile. Whereas maybe the mirrors and the floor are not as important from a disinfection perspective, but those things that we're touching a lot, if we could just get in one extra time to hit those things, that would really get us a lot of safety. Similar, like work surfaces, you think about like your the receptionist or the school secretary. Think about how many people come in and out of that office during the day and breathe on the desk or breathe on the keyboard, mice, and phones. Well, the custodian's probably not going to be able to get in there and vacuum 4 times a day. The people who work in that area, if we had access to some disinfectant, they could hit the desk, the keyboard, the mice, and the phones a couple times during the day to reduce the organisms on that surface. So again, it's a way to kind of operationalize some additional disinfection opportunities without, overworking team members. Try to think about ways you can make it easy to do the right thing. Maybe stage some disinfectants and chemicals in safe areas where people can, have an opportunity to clean things during the day. In addition, you can think about, again, as kind of a person with a health background, are there training resources you would want to make available in your school? You may have seen these in other presentations in this education set, but these are some nice things from the CDC that will make good job aids. Germs live in water. Here's some facts. Germs live in blood. Here's some facts. And also the germs in the gut. Just nice to kind of put some facts out for our colleagues, since we, with a healthcare background and nursing background, we're kind of looked to for that guidance. So the final category I have here is special surfaces. So these are things that we've received a lot of questions about, and we want to make sure that you have some guidance about. So electronics and keyboards. Just like I talked about before, these are high touch surfaces, right? And so the idea that like, if we can even hit these once or twice more in a day to reduce the number of organisms on the surface, we're going to see a safer environment. But electronics and keyboards are very vulnerable to liquid disinfectants, right? So how do we make it easy to clean and disinfect them more frequently, or to clean and disinfect them more thoroughly? So one example for keyboards is like a silicone keyboard cover. These can be ordered. What's nice about that is you can take off that silicone cover and really wash it good. You can put that in a sink of soapy water, wash it, and even dip it in a disinfecting agent, and then put that back on the surface. That can be done, occasionally to really get that surface super clean. You think about the amount of oil on hands, etc. That would make it easier to do the right thing. Electronics are often more compatible with microfiber cloths. They don't scratch the screens, things like that. Disinfectants, again, look for how can we safely use disinfectants on these touchpads, mice, computer screens, things that lots of people are touching during the day. And in that case, disinfectant wipes really might be a great option because they can be, made available and used a little more frequently than the liquids. Headphones are another tricky item. How do we manage headphones in a school environment? So it's important that headphones can definitely be a fomite. They can be soiled by dirty hands, earwax, or even head lice. So probably the best ideal practice is that every child would have their own set of headphones. They would be labeled and they could be stored in a tote or baggie. Where that's not possible, the people who are purchasing the headsets should look for multi-user sets. Multi-user sets are designed that they can be cleaned and disinfected between uses. For example, in this picture, that's a wipeable surface as compared to what you might see like foam. Earphone covers are not going to be wipeable. So purchasers should be looking for multi-user sets. This is what libraries look for. And those should, any set that's advertised as a multi-user set will have directions on how to clean and disinfect that set. You'll probably have to pay a little more money because they're going to be a little more fluid and permeable. But again, if you're meant to be using them between people, this is the safer way to go. Multi-user sets are more likely to be over-the-ear headphones and not like an in-ear earbud. Part of the reason for that is earwax. In-ear phones are going to be more likely to get clogged and contaminated with earwax. And so an over-the-ear headphone set is going to be a little more compatible with multi-user than an in-ear variety. Disposable headphone sets are available. In addition, disposable ear cushions are also available. So think about kind of, again, pairing up with the people who are looking for those sets and helping them make good decisions about purchasing. Mouth toys. And so in our early learning centers, in childcare facilities, or early childhood education centers, we are going to encounter toys that go into little people's mouths, right? And so these are things that we're going to want to look at more like we would look at a food surface. This is a place where we are going to be looking at sanitizing, not disinfecting. These are going to be safe for food surfaces. So we have to make sure that these little toys are processed such that if a child puts them into their mouth, A, they'll be free of organisms, and B, there won't be chemicals. So an example of that, of a process that's appropriate, is automatic dishwashers with sanitizing cycles. There's a standard, the NSF ANSI 184 standard would help with what that would mean, but you would want to have a sanitizing cycle. Usually that's higher heat. Hand wash these types of mouthed toys using a 3-compartment sink, similar to what you would see in food service. And in that, you would clean in one sink with a detergent and water. Remember, detergent has like a surfactant in it that breaks down oil and grease and food surface, food particles. So that's sink 1. You would rinse with water in sink 2. And then in sink 3, you will have that filled with a sanitizer. And depending on your sanitizer that you have chosen, that sanitizer will tell you how long the toy should have to stay in that sink in order to have the sanitizing time, similar to dwell time. We'll want to make sure these toys air dry completely in an area where they're protected from contamination. Really think about, like, I'm not going to put these right next to the dirty sink where they could get splashed with dirty water. I'm going to want to put those in an area where they will not be touched by dirty hands and they will not be splashed by dirty water. And it's essential to follow the instructions for use for the agent that you chose to sanitize. You will not be able to go out and say, oh, how long should I soak something in sanitizer? There's no such thing as a proper answer for that. You have to look at the specific directions for the chemical that you've chosen. The brand name on the back of the bottle, that will tell you how to dilute it, the temperature of the water to dilute it in, and how long you have to have contact with the surface to get the sanitation. Porous surface toys or soft animals is simply a fact that only toys with hard, non-porous surfaces can truly be sanitized and disinfected. Toys that are soft or have porous surfaces, they can be laundered, they can be cleaned, but they will never be disinfected. And so we have to think about how we keep these in the environment safely. One thing I will recommend is consider controlling how many animals or soft toys are available. If I have 12 toys available, maybe I'll only have 4 in use at a time so that I have 3 cycles sufficient that I have time to clean the other 2 sets. Plan to remove any soft toys from the environment if there is a high soil situation, such as a child actively vomiting or who's prone to having fecal soiling accidents that are not contained, or if you have a room that's having an outbreak. We have 3 kids out with hand, foot, and mouth disease. Well, we got to take the soft toys out of that room. We need to wash these toys in detergent and water solutions and rinse with water. And again, we're looking for cleaning. We're not going to be able to disinfect these. If it's truly been soiled, somebody's vomited on it, it's trash. There's no way to truly disinfect that. We need to remove the toys not only when they're contaminated, but we have to remove them from service when they're worn such that we can no longer safely wash them. With that in mind, we really have to set a budget for a regular replacement of these toys. Diapering, again, is something we have to consider for children with special needs or for early childhood centers. With that, CDC has very specific steps for diaper changing. They have a great graphic at the link on the header of this table, and I've taken the information off that resource, such that we're preparing the area, such as using a disposable liner. We're dispensing diaper cream onto a tissue before the child's in that area. We're kind of putting that multi-use container away before a child comes into it. And then each of your supplies, your clean diaper, the number of wipes you use, the gloves, your plastic or waterproof bag for your soiled clothing, you bring that with you, kind of prepare for the diapering. To clean the child, making sure that you're always using a wipe from front to back, keeping soiled diaper and clothing away from any surfaces that can't be cleaned. And if we have soiled clothing, better to put it into a plastic bag, like a leak-proof bag, and tie it in a single knot so that it doesn't leak, send it home with the child. It's better not to rinse those in your center. Removing trash, we're going to place the used wipes into the soiled diaper, and then the soiled diaper and the wipe into the trash can, removing and discarding gloves at that point. At that point, you're going to replace the diaper. If you need to apply diaper cream, you would need to use a tissue or a freshly gloved finger. Fasten the diaper, dress the child, wash the child's hands, clean up, removing the liner from the changing surface and discarding it in the trash can, wiping up visible soil, wetting the entire surface with a disinfectant and leaving it to sit, to dwell there, and then washing your hands. So with that, I know I'm not with you live to answer your questions. I will be very happy to take your questions. My email address is on the screen. I work at this service called Nebraska ICAP, and our whole job is to interact with people in healthcare and school settings. And so if you would like to call us, I have an open hotline at 402-552-2881. And our administrative assistant will take your message, and one of us will get back to you with the best answer that we can find. So thank you. That's the end.
That concludes the online education. I would like to thank all of our presenters for their experience, knowledge, and expertise. Be sure to subscribe so you're up to date with all of Nebraska Methodist College's continuing education offerings. Thank you.